and popular, the Birla Industrial and Technological Museum, Kolkata. All of you, dear students, distinguished personalities include respected teachers, professors, scientists, doctors, dietitians, and above all the director and officials of this reputed institute and other staff members who are present over here know that we are going to celebrate the World Health Day today, organized jointly by Professor Ghosh Foundation, Society for Nutrition and Dietetics, and Birla Industrial and Technological Museum, the National Council of Science Museums, Ministry of Culture, Government of India. May I request, on behalf of the organizing committee, to please Professor Miyamkanti Poddar, President, Professor Ghosh Foundation, to deliver the welcome address. Very good morning to everybody, my dear students, dear teachers of the respective institute, our today's speaker, Dr. Kunal Sarkar, Senior Cardiac Surgeon of Medica Super Specialty Hospital, Kolkata. V.S. Ramachandran, Director BITM, Kolkata. Mrs. Paramita Das Dokto, Dietitian, CNCI, Kolkata, and Secretary of the Society for Nutrition and Dietetics, Mr. Gautam Shil, Technical Officer of BITM, Kolkata, and the members of the Professor Ghosh Foundation. It is my pleasure and privilege on behalf of Foundation as well as from myself to welcome you all in this August gathering of Foundation for School Students, organized jointly by Professor Ghosh Foundation, BITM National Council of Science Museum, Government of India, Kolkata, and Society for Nutrition and Dietetics, Kolkata. In this August gathering for school students program, I believe most of the audiences, excepting the members of the foundation, must have some questions about this activity of the foundation. So obviously, you might have questions like, who is Professor Ghosh? Why the foundation is organized such an activity for the school students in the memory of Professor Ghosh? Professor Ghosh, whose full name was Jagat Jivan Ghosh, was our beloved popular teacher of postgraduate classes. He in fact was a legendary teacher of teachers and scientists all over India and abroad. International renowned scientist and former centenary professor of biochemistry, University of Calcutta. He joined the department of the University of Calcutta officially as first lecturer in the year 1956, when the department of University of Calcutta was established. In addition to his brilliant career, qualifications, achievements, and the backgrounds, I'd like to mention some of his unique qualities, which are in fact quite impressed and his students, colleagues, friends and others. Professor Ghosh had a unique magical quality of creating a sense of motivation, devotion to duty and passion for the subject among the students and the colleagues, like a friend, philosopher and a guide. His another unique quality was blending of scientific knowledge with the society, with the religion, as well as the culture, in addition to the knowledge of one subject to the other one. In fact, the development of biomathematical research school in the premises of the biochemistry department of Calcutta University at the Baligan Science College was one of his such creation of early 80 of the last century at Kolkata. Professor Ghosh also in early 60 of the last century first started and built an active school of neurobiochemistry and neuropharmacology. First started and built an in the University of Kolkata in the Department of Biochemistry, and in fact at that time the Department of Biochemistry was not in the Baligan Science College, it was in the Baligan Rajaraja Science College, Kolkata. And this subject has now been recognized by the University Grants Commission, New Delhi, and included as one of the course subjects in the subjects of postgraduate degree of different disciplines of the life sciences. His dedication was enormous and his contribution was incomparable in the development of biochemistry, neurochemistry in those days in India, especially at the Kolkata, then Calcutta. Could you imagine at that time 89 students did PhD under his guidance during his service period, only 34 years. He never kept himself confined in a particular area of the subjects or the field. In fact, sky was the limit of his thought, of his dream. Of course, considering detailed infrastructure of the working room. Professor Ghosh was the first nominated neurochemistry panel member of International Brain Research Organization under UNESCO from India. Needless to mention that he was awarded many medals, prizes, fellowship as recognitions from international, national organizations for his outstanding contribution in research and education of biological prospects in clinical science. So, to honor such a knowledge-attractive, intuitive, and dynamic, brain-mind-inducing, vibrating, and inspiring personality and erudite scholar, Professor J.J. Ghosh, we the students felt proud to establish this non-profitable charitable foundation in his memory by the generous donations of his students, colleagues, friends, and admirers in the year 2012. For fulfillment of Professor Ghosh's commitments to the education and research. To fulfill the mission and the vision of Professor Ghosh, The foundation during this short period 2012 to 2019 started and continuing some activities, though I am not giving the details of that, but that's also a lot of things that have been done by the foundations for the benefit of the students of the different levels of the education and research in India and world at large. Today, the World Health Day, Foundation is starting this activity first time for the school students to draw your attention, concentration, and exposure in different way of education from your daily routine education to boost up your thought, your dream, your in education and research, and also to inspire you for higher education and research in coming future. In this program today, an eminent physician, Dr. Kunal Sarkar, Senior Cardiac Surgeon of Medica Specialty Hospital, Kolkata, will deliver a talk on medicine yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Next, there will be a short presentation and hands-on demonstration by Mrs. Paramita Das Dotto, dietitian, CNCI Kolkata, and Secretary of the Society for Nutrition and Dietetics. And after these two events, there will be a poster drawing competition for school students. Theme of this poster competition will be same based on the topic of the lecture of Dr. Sarkar. So I request all the students, especially those who will participate in the poster drawing competition, must be attentive, concentrate your mind wholeheartedly in lecture to think critically about the topic of Dr. Sarkar. With these brief introductions and information, finally, on behalf of the foundation and on behalf of me, once again, I welcome you all in this August gathering to grace the occasion and make the program grand success. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for your lecture. I would like to request Professor Poddar to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Sarkar, to us.
It's a great pleasure to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Kunal Sarkar. Dr. Sarkar did his schooling in St. Xavier's School and graduated from Medical College, Calcutta with gold medal in surgery. He was also trained in cardiac surgery in England, and he is a fellow of Royal College of Surgeons. Dr. Sarkar is a faculty of Imperial College London. Currently, he is a senior vice chairman of Medica Super Specialty Hospital and leading the cardiac program. His areas of interest are adult cardiac surgery, coronary bypass, healthcare delivery. Dr. Sarkar is a former president of Indian Association of Cardiothoracic Surgeons. He is a member of EACTS, ISMICS and IACTS, and also a founder member of Calcutta Debating Circle. He has several contributions in both Bengali and English publications. Dr. Sarkar, please come to the dais and deliver.
Hello. Projector. Light the dim code. The audience light needs to be dim, otherwise you can't see anything. Okay? Thank you very much. So at the outset, my respects and my homage to a great personality like Professor J.J. Ghosh, in whose memory and as an acknowledgement to whose career of substance and sincerity, the progeny of Dr. Ghosh has thought of this foundation and thought of this wonderful activity whereby the generation of tomorrow can be given a little bit of synopsis of what is happening in the world and environment around us. In the same token, my heartfelt gratitude to my friend Komolesh, because it was through him that I got this wonderful access and opportunity to our friends and colleagues in the BITM, which when I was your age, which is about 100 years ago, we used to come over here and spend many an afternoon fiddling through all the interactive exhibits and things. And some of us who are of my age group will remember that BITM was the only place in Calcutta where prior to, I think, something like 1976, you had to come to see the only operating television set in the city. So before television actually came into Calcutta in 76, 77, if you ever wondered what a television set looked like, you came to BITM because BITM used to have like a closed circuit lecture system, and that was our fascination for this place. And I'm ever so overcome with emotions to have had the opportunity today to speak to you about a topic which is very near to my heart. Now, before I start speaking, there are some senior members I see in the first couple of rows and a lot of young people, right? So thank you for taking this time out. Thank you to the schools and thank you to the teachers for this initiative that you have shown. And whenever I speak to a young audience, I am far more afraid than when I speak to a grown-up audience. You know why? Not that you are going to attack me, not that you are going to hit me, because I know that every one of you is on a statistical average about 25% more intelligent than I am. And that is the process of human evolution. With every generation, human intellect increases by 7 to 8%. So have any of you seen one of these old telephones? You will see them in BITM, used to dial the dial like this and speak. So I am that kind of a telephone, and you are a smartphone sitting in front of me. So it is not a competition of intellect. All of us acknowledge you are very clever people, but man is nothing about a knowledge of history. A building which is fantastic in the 100th floor is nothing without the foundation on which it stands on. So, as I have been born and brought up in this scientific environment to do with medicine for a good part of almost last 4 decades, I wanted to share the story with you. It's like a storytelling session, that how humanity has developed and how medicine has developed and how it will continue to develop in your hands and in your minds. Now, when we talk about medicine throughout the ages, there is something very wonderful about human life. I don't know how many, I don't want to turn it into a question and answer session. Just think of a few things before we get into medicine. The age of the earth, the planet on which you and I exist, say is something like 8 billion years. So on the planet, which has been around for 8 billion years, we, human beings, in any form, whether you call us the Homo sapiens, the Neanderthals, the primitive human beings, we have been on the planet for about a maximum of 250,000 years. And if you have a calculator, a cell phone, a pen and paper, if you did a fraction of 8 billion vis-a-vis 250,000, then what it means is if the earth was like 24 hours in age, then the human beings have been on the face of the earth for 5 minutes. So of every known creature, every known form of life, how did life origin on the planet? Our idea about origins of life is extremely unclear. It was a very inert situation. If you believe the Big Bang theory of genesis of life, when there was an explosion, when you had carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, somewhere in the cosmic atmosphere, there was a kind of a chemical reaction which was catalyzed, and all these inert elemental compounds got together to synthesize a sequence of biochemical substances which later on manifests itself as life. The life of a human being, the color of a butterfly, the shape of a plant, the grass on the soil, everything originated from the elemental compounds, and we do not have the vaguest idea. There are theories like the primordial soup and so on and so forth. But the funny thing of life is, we do not know how it started, and we do not know what happens or when is it going to end. So the so-called domain of human knowledge, we are like a transit passenger in the airport. We have started a journey which we know we will end someday, and all our preoccupation right now is for the journey itself. The beginning is unknown, the end is unknown. And that is the story of life, till many fundamental questions of creation the puzzle has to be resolved someday, somehow, somewhat. Now let's come back to medicine. So we have been on the surface of the planet for about 250,000 years. If you look back at human history, then perhaps even if you consider the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Mesopotamians, the oldest human civilization probably goes back about 10, 12,000 years, maximum 15,000, not longer than that. That out of 250,000 years, only 15,000 of those 250,000 years can our species claim to have some kind of civilization. And through the ancient civilization, whether it was the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Assyrians, whoever you looked at, people thought what was disease about? People were living, people were alive, and periodically we would get sick, we would be inflicted on by diseases, and for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, we were under the impression that things like the plagues of Egypt was considered to be a fact that the gods are angry. It is a divine intervention. You're getting sick. Why are you getting sick? Because the gods are angry. Whoever their god was, the Egyptian god, the Greek god, the Assyrian god, the Sumerian god, the South American god, the gods were getting angry, and thereby the gods were cursing you from up behind the clouds in heaven, and that accounted for sickness, and that is why we were getting sick. Some of you may have seen the movie, The Ten Commandments. In Ten Commandments, when Moses comes into Egypt, you see, it's a different story, that Moses inflicts plague upon Egypt. It's a very nice story, but obviously scientifically it's not true. So for hundreds of thousands of years, human civilization was under the fear of the person behind the clouds who will make you sick, thinking that sickness is a curse inflicted upon by God. And funnily enough, the first treatments that we know, that when did we first make an attempt to treat diseases, to make sick people better, and not just leave them to die somewhere or the other. The first attempts of treatment happened in temples. And this is the temple. The picture you see is the Greek god called Asclepios. In Medical College Calcutta, we used to have a festival called Esculapia that comes from the Greek god called Asclepios, the Greek god of medicine. And you may see this symbol being used in various medical associations, organizations, symbol for doctors, many things like this. What is this symbol about? This symbol is the staff and snake of the Greek god Asclepios. It was in that temple that ancient medicine used to be practiced, because who was practicing the ancient medicine? There was nothing as doctors, nothing as surgeons, there were priests. So it was the priests in ancient society who thought, there were people of moral values, people of compassion, who thought that, look, so many people are falling sick and dying, so we need to make them better. So it is the religious institution that took upon the practice of medicine, and we are talking about something like 10th, 12th century BC over here. There was a funny practice where we still do not know how and why it used to be done. There are still, I don't need this light. Or you need it for your camera, fair enough. So there is a practice where many skulls have been excavated. And you see, this is not restricted to any one part of the world, only in Egypt, only in South America, all over the world. And there is because of some ancient concept, people used to drill holes in the brain. It was called trepanation. We call it trepanation. We don't know what it used to be called in that era. And because of this trepanation, a lot of skulls have been found out, tens of thousands of years ago. So some form of surgery, some form of treatment was being done, but no scholars so far have unearthed the secret that we call it trepanation, why this was being done. Probably somebody clever amongst you can take this subject for a PhD research someday. The real advent of thinking in medicine comes from this great person, from a small island of Kos. Kos is a very small island just off the mainland of Greece, to the west of Greece, and his name was Hippocrates. You have heard the name of Hippocrates, you have seen it in movies, you have seen the press, the people telling doctors, go by the oath of Hippocrates. Hippocrates was not a lawyer, Hippocrates was a physician. And why Hippocrates is important in modern history, in the history of mankind, is from Hippocrates starts the era when we realize the separation of divine from the disease. Hippocrates starts the thought process that, look, we have to look at things differently. People are becoming sick, there are different kinds of problems, sickness, death, etc. And there must be different causes for it. It is all not due to because some god is angry somewhere. So let's start thinking. And in that philosophy of Hippocrates, he wrote quite a few treatises, quite a few compendium. Hippocrates encouraged the separation of the priests from the physicians, and he formed a kind of moral code of conduct that how we should behave, how doctors, you didn't call them doctors then, healers, how healers should behave. And that moral, like this is election time now, we are going through a moral code of conduct. So Hippocrates in 5th century BC writes down the way the physicians and healers should behave themselves. So if you are to think about one date in history, that is the watershed line for the evolution of medicine, that era is 5th century BC. There must be some people interested in history. 5th century BC is a wonderful time. I don't know what was the astrology or the cosmic connections in 5th century BC, because in 5th century BC you have Hippocrates in Greece. Whom do you have in India? In Indian civilization, Gautam Buddha. Gautam Buddha comes with his first socialistic thinkings in 5th century BC. We have Charak, Shushruth, everybody appearing in 5th century BC. So look, even in those days when there was no internet and no connection, human philosophy and thinking seemed to spread worldwide. And there was a churning in ourselves that let us start thinking. We cannot leave everything to gods cursing human beings and stuff like that. And in our ancient Indian practice, from 5th to the 4th till the 3rd century BC, we saw the evolution of Charak, Shushruth. We saw the evolution of Ayurveda as a science. And a lot of thinking, thought process and progress was made in ancient Indian medicine in that era. When you look at temples, especially next time when you look at Buddhist temples, when you go to Ajanta, Ellora, when you go to Nalanda, look at these Buddhist viharas. Why were Buddhist viharas shaped like this? Because they were nursing homes in absentia. People were lifted up from the street, and the Buddhist priests and monks were actually treating the sick people in these Buddhist viharas. So similar to the theory of Asclepius, the first treatment. Today we want to make temples out of our hospitals. Remember, hospitals first started in the temples because sickness was first treated in the altar of the gods. That is how human philosophy evolved. It will take me a good part of 2 days. If you have 2 days to spare, give me 5 hours each day, I can tell you a more comprehensive history. But today we have to march ahead. So from the pre-era of Christ, if you take a step next to 300 years, a whole lot of activity happened in the area of the world. An extremely fertile area of human civilization was today what we call the Middle East. The Islamic world, the Persian world. The world was not always like this, what you see it today. About terrorists and Bin Laden and Islamism and fundamentalism. Remember, the Islamic world, the Middle Eastern Islamic civilization, was a cradle of scientific fertility. And without them, modern European civilization would not have come anywhere. So many of the works that was done in medieval Europe, from Europe they were collected by land, they traveled into the Middle East. And we have the manuscript of Galen, the manuscript of medieval physicians, which were, where do we get them from? We get them from the cities which are now bombarded, Damascus, Tehran, Baghdad. These were the places like universities, academicians. These were the temples of knowledge. And a couple of people who were the real thought leaders in the world of Islamic medicine in 10th century was the great Ibn Sina. There's a wonderful movie on Ibn Sina. Go back and see it sometime. Ibn Sina, there were no specialists those days. He had treatment for cataracts. He was doing cesarean sections. Ibn Sina knew how to treat fractures. And people used to travel the length of Europe to go to Ibn Sina to learn many of his medical insights. And there was another great thinker called Al-Nafis. Al-Nafis was based in Baghdad. I'll tell you a little bit later that in Europe, we got to learn about human circulation 600 years later. This man 600 years earlier, today we are able to decipher, translate, decode his writings. And Al-Nafis told us about human circulation 600 years before William Harvey. There's a wonderful painting. We digress to art a little bit, art and medicines. The study of medicine is almost like study of medical humanities. So medicine and art is almost intertwined with one another. The great Italian Renaissance painter, Raphael painted a painting called the School of Athens. When you have 2 minutes, Google School of Athens. And the School of Athens is not just a wonderful painting. This is like a group photograph you take nowadays. So Raphael took a group photograph of all the important scientists, physicians, healers, thinkers in medieval world. And it's a wonderful representation in one photograph of the who's who of science and thinking in medieval Europe. But we have a debt to pay to art, as I told you today. That there was no subject called medicine. The original subjects that used to be taught. The first universities appeared in the 11th century. The first university in the world is the University of Bologna, 1096. There was no subject of medicine, there was theology, there was languages, and there was law. There was nothing called art, science, etc., etc. So the mere fact that people were looking into human biology, human structure, how are we actually built? What does the body composition look like? What does the skull look like, the brain look like, the stomach look like, the organs look like? Who were the first people who asked these questions? Not doctors, but artists. And the person with whom this artistic inquiry into medicine starts is the great Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci is become immortalized in the world for his Mona Lisa. But when you read about Leonardo da Vinci in the second phase of the Italian Renaissance, you realize that Leonardo da Vinci, he was a mathematician, he was a designer, he was an engineer. He said, and he thought that he was a useless artist. And Leonardo thought that he was rubbish as an artist. And he never, in his whole life, Leonardo lived a long life, almost 78 years. And in his whole life, he only painted 25 pictures, full-blown canvases. And Mona Lisa took almost 7 years to finish. So, in the back of Leonardo da Vinci's mind, he was a polymath. He was a strange man. He used to write in the wrong direction. He used to write from left to right. Sometimes he used to write from right to... His work on optics is groundbreaking. So Leonardo da Vinci, you know how he used to study? Leonardo da Vinci used to bribe. Whom did he bribe? He bribed the people who were looking after the graveyards. So the moment somebody died and got buried within 6 to 12 hours, Da Vinci used to bribe the people in the burial grounds, get the body exhumed, and he used to dissect and draw wonderfully graphically all the structures. He studied the human embryo, our musculoskeletal system, our circulatory system, the human heart. And another reason why within a span of about 30-40 years, we had a lot of development in this field was rivalry. Leonardo da Vinci was a senior artist, and like happens in Tollywood and Bollywood, you have one hero being challenged by the other. Leonardo da Vinci was an artist, was being challenged by Michelangelo. And Michelangelo suddenly became the top of the town, the number one in the, in top of the pops list. Leonardo da Vinci's popularity was going down. He was an older man. And in the last phase of his career, Leonardo da Vinci, as he was drawing the Last Supper, one of his most famous and mysterious paintings, as he was drawing the Last Supper, this is Michelangelo, that Leonardo da Vinci, in one day, he would draw the Last Supper for half an hour, and almost for 2-3 hours, twice the thrice the time Da Vinci gave to studying human anatomy. This is Da Vinci's own illustration of the human heart. If today Da Vinci appeared in first MBBS and drew these pictures, he would get very high marks. They are remarkably accurate. So this is the huge debt that medicine owes to art in its knowledge evolution. So now we come to a phase when, thanks to the artists, thanks to the material science, we get some idea of what the human structure is about, some idea. Still there is a lot of clarity. We still know what the liver is like, we know what the heart is like, we know the muscles and bones, but there is still lack of clarity about structure and function. We do not know. We can draw you the diagram of a liver, but in the 15th, 16th century, there was no idea how the heart works. There was no idea what the liver does. There was no idea what the different tubes in the body were doing. And we will come to that a little later. Now, another milestone in science was, if you think about diseases, now we are talking about, we have made our journey another 200-300 years, and we are in the early 19th century. And in the 19th century, the disease that was really killing people by tens of thousands, the disease of that era used to be infective diseases. There were a lot of infections. Acute bacterial infections, chronic bacterial infections. So infectious diseases was at its worst in the world. For every 100 people in the world who died in the 19th century, 90% of the deaths would be due to infectious diseases. In the early 19th century, the human life, very few people would live beyond 50 years. Infant mortality rate was stupendous. And then people started thinking about the cause of the disease, the microorganisms, how to sterilize them, how to identify individual bacteria and start isolating them. And 3 names are very important in this area. One is Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur, you talk about pasteurization of milk, so that is who it is after, Louis Pasteur. Then we had Lister. Lister, following on from Louis Pasteur's work, did the original work on sterilization, initial ideas about vaccination. And Robert Koch was very important in the Asian perspective because he did a lot of work on chronic infections, tuberculosis. That was a kind of disease that was killing people. That was the killers of the world. You did not need bombs and terrorists those days. In those days, the terrorists were the bacteria. And when we talk about infectious diseases, I'll talk a little bit about cardiovascular diseases next few minutes. Another fantastic thing happened. A gentleman called Alexander Fleming. I happened to work in England in the same hospital. Obviously, I'm not as old as Alexander Fleming. And where my department was, the cardiac surgery department, was in the next corridor to the room in where Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. So as everybody was literally breaking their heads on the wall, how the hell you fought infection, how to identify the wound infection, the war infection, the germs. You know why it all happened? It all happened because Alexander Fleming one night, when he was leaving his lab, he forgot to shut his window. His window was left open. And his bacterial petri dishes on which the bacterial plates were done was right in the front of the window with the window open in contact with the air. So the next morning, Alexander Fleming comes to the lab. He identifies that the spores have grown, that he managed to grow the anthrax, the penicillus fungus, from which penicillin was discovered, to fight the staphylococcal infections. And Fleming kept it as a secret to himself for quite a long time. And then some people told him, "No, you're stupid. This is a miracle cure today. In this fungus lies the antidote to the bacterial staphylococcal infection." So because it came from the penicillus fungus, it was called penicillin. But the person who actually developed penicillin as an antibiotic that could be used world over was the Cambridge-based Australian scientist called Florey. And Florey, medicine is a very interesting story. How Florey made mass production of penicillin possible. You did not have any biogenetic labs or very sophisticated pharmaceutical companies those days. How he got penicillin was, when people were treated with penicillin, he never wasted their urine. He used to go from patient to patient and ward to ward and collect every drop of urine the patient was passing. And from that, the extractions of penicillin was kind of recycled all over again. So those were the early days. How we, the doctors, the scientists, fought over the infectious diseases. Now from the infectious diseases, from the early 1900s, we are now living in the 2000s, and we are dominated by the diseases now which are called the lifestyle diseases. And the lifestyle diseases is dominated by cardiac problems, heart diseases. Why is the heart important? It's the only pump in the body. It pumps 6 liters of blood a minute. If you ever cut an artery, the blood would go about 25 to 30 feet. If you joined every blood vessel in the body together, you could go around the world 15 times. And in one day, your heart has worked for about 100,000 times. And from the time you are born, if you live to the age of 70, your heart would have worked for 4 crore heartbeats without a rest. No holidays, no Durga Puja, no Eid, no Christmas, no strike. It is the only organ known in science and biology which has this capacity to work for a period of 70 years, 80 times to 90 times a minute without rest. It was not made by Apple or Samsung. It does not need recharging. There are no power sockets. And this organ is working on biological energy. This is an artificial heart, I tell you later. Note here, when we talk about lifestyle diseases, it is not just storytelling to you today, but these are the factors which are causing a lot of damage to this organ, which is working tirelessly to keep us alive every single moment we are living. And these are the factors of smoking, diabetes, high cholesterol, diet, which people will talk to you about today, excess body weight, high pressure, stress. So this is a very valuable organ in our system, and we must know how to look after it. A little about, I mentioned to you about medieval science and human circulation. Leonardo da Vinci was drawing fantastic pictures about the human heart. Nobody knew what the heart was doing, and there was utter confusion whether circulation started in the liver, in the heart, what was happening. But everybody knew one thing, and that one thing is, if you stuck a knife in the heart, you're dead. So everybody knew for 200,000 years that if there is somebody you dislike, you have a knife in your hand, put it through the chest, it goes through the heart, fellow dies. Why? How? What's the reason? What is this machine doing? We didn't have any clear idea at all. And who comes up with the solution? It comes from a young person, 25 years of age. He was an Englishman, William Harvey. He was doing his PhD. It used to be called a different degree those days. As I told you, the first university in the world, Bologna. So he wasn't studying in England, he was studying in Bologna. And Bologna, he just looks at how the blood flows in the veins by tying tourniquets in the hand. William Harvey in 1632, no fancy machines, no advanced labs, just by observing the passage of the blood from the veins and in the arteries by trying tourniquets, he comes to the clarity of thinking that look, circulation is happening because the heart is pumping. Blood is going from the heart through the arteries and coming back by the veins. Now you would not even get this as a 2-mark question today in your question paper. But that was where human knowledge was stuck for 600 years. We did not know the answer to this question till William Harvey unraveled. And this time, 1630s, I had this habit of turning through my history book. Fantastic things were happening in the world, like 5th century BC. Within 5 miles of William Harvey used to live another gentleman by the name of Isaac Newton. Almost the same year, the theory of circulation and the theory of gravitation comes to the world. You can have a separate lecture on Isaac Newton sometimes. Isaac Newton lived for almost mid-60s, and all his work was done by the time he was 27 years of age. Optics, light, gravitation, law, forces, everything, discovery of calculus. By 26, 27 years, Isaac Newton's scientific dossier was finished and completed. What he did for the next 40 years of his life was completely mysterious. He's a very unknown element in a relatively modern era. So William Harvey is a founding father of human circulation. So we know the structure. Now we have an idea how the circulation and all this happens. And what is the next question? In the era of lifestyle diseases, people knew that the structure of the heart could be defective. People knew that you could get chest pains, angina, heart attacks because there are blockages and people were dying. So how to diagnose? How to know what is wrong? It is not enough just to allow somebody die and do a post-mortem and say, we are so sad, the child has died because there is a hole in the heart, or this grown-up man has died because there is a blockage in the arteries. That is not, medicine is not about recrimination, medicine is about diagnosis. You have to tell from before what is wrong. So diagnostic activity became now the focus of attention. And there are many, many, many workers who's worked on this field. I'll just name 2 to you. One was this gentleman by the name of Eric Frossman. Eric Frossman in 1929, he said that, look, there has to be a way by which our circulation, the heart, we can take pictures of it. Today it is called angiogram, catheterization and all these things. But Frossman said in 1929, there are ways and means we can take pictures of these organs. Nobody believed him. He used to make friends with his nurses, with his colleagues, people working in the hospital. And Eric Frossman had many girlfriends, and the reason he had many girlfriends was he used to allure them into the cath lab, use them as a subject and do all his experimental studies. He was expelled from the hospital as a bad person. But when years later we look back at Eric Frossman's work, that was a foundation of cardiac catheterization. And many years later, in 1958, the modern cardiac angiography was done by Mason Soames. This is a picture. This is what you call a cardiac. What is an angiogram? You come across somebody who's having chest pain. Oh, Aknar had a blockage, there's a block in the heart. But where? Heart has arteries like this, taking blood to the muscle. So what these people were trying for the last 50, 60 years was to take this photograph, which through an X-ray machine and radio contrast lets us know that where the problem is. Now that you know where the problem is, the question comes that how are you going to treat it? But there was one problem about treating the heart. You can operate on the stomach, the bones, the brains, everything. But how do you treat the heart? Because number one, the heart is moving all the time. And number two, if you ever put the heart to rest, the rest of the body gets no blood supply at all. So you can say, fine, I know what the problem with the heart is. I'm going to fix it, I'm going to repair it, I'm going to stop the heart. Okay, very briefly, for say half an hour, 30 minutes. I'm a brilliant surgeon. You stop the heart for something like 90 seconds, the brain will die. So there was no solution. People knew what the problem was, nobody could fix it, because you cannot stop the heart and maintain circulation to the rest of the body. That was the next puzzle. And people like this, John Lewis, etc., they devised a machine. This is called the heart-lung machine. And the heart-lung machine changed the future of heart surgery completely. Like, God bless it, doesn't happen. If suddenly the power goes off in the hall right now, what will happen? The standby electricity will come in. So when we stop the heart, we put the heart on a machine outside the body so that the whole work of oxygenation and circulation is happening through the machine, which is the heart-lung machine. And this made the first modern heart surgery possible late in the 1950s. And the surgery that really changed almost the destiny of humankind was the treatment of heart blockages. Because as I told you, we had known about the bacteria, we had discovered antibiotics, so a lot of infectious diseases were controlled. But as because of various things, diabetes, food habits, hypertension and all that, people were coming down with heart attacks, blockages in the heart, and now we can take pictures. We know where the blockages are, so how to treat it? And the solution came from this young man called Rene Favaloro. He had not passed his exams. He was the youngest person in Cleveland Clinic watching the senior doctors operate. And he had the idea that, look, instead of doing something very complicated, I can just, it's like the flyover in Park Circuits, your Ma flyover. The road underneath is absolutely congested. So why don't I do a flyover at the top so that the blood goes from A to B, jumping over the blockage, and the problem is resolved. So the simple idea came from Rene Favaloro. But much before him, this person, Alexis Cannon, was the last surgeon ever to have got a Nobel Prize. Because even the great Hippocrates has said that, look, you can try a lot of treatments, but trying to treat or operating on the heart and blood vessels is dangerous. People will die, don't do it. And for thousands and thousands of years it was never done. This man, who was born in a very poor family, who taught him how to suture the heart and blood vessels? No teacher. He was taught by his mother. His mother was a poor woman who used to stitch torn clothes. You will see in many laundries in the para, people stitch clothes. In Bangla we say rikupara. In English they are called seamstresses. So his mother is to earn some hard-earned money by stitching torn clothes. And this surgeon saw his mother every night in the midnight oil, stitching torn clothes with a special technique of suturing. And he said, why can't we apply it to vascular surgery? And he applied it to vascular surgery. It worked wonders. And it was only due to the work of Alexis Carrel, who learned from his mother that the entire specialty of cardiac surgery ever came about. Cardiovascular surgery is the youngest specialty in medicine. It's been only around for about 60, 70 years. And this is, as I told you, you have the flyover out in the roads. So we take a piece of vein from maybe a vein or an artery somewhere in the body. This is a block in the vessel. We just jump over it from one spot to another, and the problem of the blockages are resolved. This operation is the most common operation ever performed in the history of surgery. It is the most scientifically documented procedure. And at one stage, there is still there are more than 10 lakhs coronary bypasses being done in the world even today. But along with coronary bypass, young people like you, young students, youngsters are always thinking. So a young cardiologist started thinking that look, all this surgery is fine. But what can we repair some of these blocks without actually doing a cut, without actually incising? Why can't we go inside the tubes? And this young person, Andreas Brunswick, he came up with an idea of an angioplasty. And in angioplasty, what you do over here is, I don't know what it is. And in angioplasty, what you do over here is, let's go forward a bit. That this is a kind of blockage you have in the artery, which is stopping the blood from reaching the heart. So through the arteries, you get access into the heart with the cardiac catheters. And you have this thing like a balloon. And what this balloon is doing is actually inflating. It is flattening the obstruction. It is creating a passage all over again. This is the technique of angioplasty, which has been a significant development, probably the most significant development in the field of vascular science over the last 100 years. But it is not enough to give pressure, it will collapse again. So to prevent it from collapsing, the spring-like structure is placed inside, and that is what you call a stent. You will hear a lot of people talking about stents. This is what a stent is about. These stents come coated with medicines so that the cells from inside the stents do not regrow again. So an angioplasty and a bypass surgery, in the simpler blocks you do bypass, in the more complex lesions you do an angioplasty. And these two things together really change the modality, the risk, the millions of people who are dying helplessly from cardiovascular condition. These two treatments changed it dramatically. Diabetes. I need to tell you a word or two about diabetes. The first person that should come to your mind when you utter the word diabetes is this gentleman. I'm sure all of you know who he is. Right? Swami Vivekananda, Narendranath Thakur, etc. Person, the poor man died at the age of 39, 1903. His blood sugars used to be around 600. Normal blood sugar is around 120. There was no cure for diabetes. He was diabetic from the age of 18 or 19. And diabetes is not dangerous because the sugars are high. Diabetes is like rust that affects the whole system. Diabetes is dangerous because it attacks the heart, the eyes, the kidneys, the nerves, all structures. Even for Swami Vivekananda. Throughout his life, there's an important story to it. When he approached Maharaja of Khetri to go to Chicago, Khetri was his sponsor, Maharaja of Khetri. He bought him the ticket to the ship that took him to America. So he requested the Maharaj, can I have a ticket for the single cabin? Maharaja said that, look, this is a sannyasi. Of course I will give him a single cabin ticket. But the man has no pleasures in life. He is a total ascetic. Why does he want a single birth ticket for? He never realized that Swamiji was quite guilty, ashamed of himself because of his diabetes. He had to go to the toilet every half an hour, 20 minutes. So he was, embarrassed in public to do that. So that is why he had requested. And later on, in one of his last visits to Shillong, few months before he died, when his kidney failure had set in, heart failure and kidney failure, Swami Vivekananda had almost stopped passing urine, end-stage renal failure. The poor man is writing to his disciples that, look, I think I'm getting better because after so many years of life, my frequency of urination is getting down. But till that time, there was no treatment for diabetes at all. And our great worry is, we still don't know what diabetes is due to. The precise cause of diabetes is still unknown. We have some treatment for it. And it was Banting and Best who in the 19 to 1920, which is a good 17 years after Vivekananda died, that the initial discovery of insulin and the treatment of diabetes, I should not use the word treatment, it is control of diabetes. We are still not treating diabetes because whatever you do not know, you cannot prevent. So we are only treating diabetes in a very half-hearted way, even today, because we need from amongst you some clever mind to do that path-breaking research that will tell us the cause of diabetes. Another aspect has been genetics. We know the big structure of the human body, the eyes, muscles, nervous system, skeletal system, cardiac system, etc. But in the molecular biology is concerned, the ultimate constituent of the human body, the human genome, that was detected by Watson and Crick sometime in the 1950s. The double helix that all of you have to memorize and draw diagrams in your exam was the work of Watson and Crick from the University of Cambridge. And in 2003, like decoding a software, if your computer goes wrong, what does the repair shop do? It looks at the software. When your cell phone updates, what does it do? It uploads and downloads software. So the whole human genetic software was decoded for the first time in 2003 in a worldwide project called the Human Genomic Project. And now we are trying to find out the genetic causes of most diseases. Medicine has also been dominated by the problem of cancer. Cancer is where you have cell replication happening in a very aggressive, in a very damaging, and a very uncontrolled way. There are thousands of people who've done selfless work in the field of cancer. But if one name has to be taken, that is the name of Madame Curie, who along with her husband, Marie Curie and Pierre Curie, did pioneering work on radiation. And this woman, look at her picture, she herself died of cancer, knowing very well that day in and day out, the work that she was doing in the lab, being exposed to radiation, that is ultimately going to kill her. And it did kill her. She literally killed herself in her own thesis, in her own quest for developing advanced radiation. And few months before she died, this is Albert Einstein visiting Marie Curie, because when Einstein knew, everybody knew that Marie Curie would not live for very long. Einstein came over and visited her. Across the history of medicine, we've had a lot of limelights. India has also contributed, not as much. We've had Ronald Ross here in Calcutta, got a Nobel Prize for it, by isolating the Anopheles mosquito spread cycle of malaria. Malaria is not an Asian disease. Malaria is a European disease. Malaria is called malaria. It means mal air, bad air. Malaria originated from Spain, from Mediterranean. Malaria was brought to India by the Europeans. And malaria spread in India when the Indian railway was being constructed, because people used to dig trenches and holes with stagnant water, and the mosquitoes bred over there. But Ronald Ross identified the Plasmodium vivax spread through the mosquitoes, and there was some control of malaria. Similarly, we had the next time you go through Lawson Street, it's actually UN Brahmachari Street, where UN Brahmachari discovered urea stibamine for the cure of Kala-Azar. It was very sad that he was not in contention for a Nobel Prize, because he got a very early patent of it. And the most tragic, but the most brilliant Indian doctor in recent times has been Dr. Subhash Mukhopadhyay, who did absolute brilliant work in in vitro fertilization, test tube baby. We never recognized his work. The same year, Steptoe and Williams did the same research from England and were considered as a pioneering father, when actually Subhash Mukhopadhyay's work was a few months ahead of Steptoe and Williams. Now, before I end in the last minute, medicine is not about fantastic people and fantastic science. Medicine is also about the reality of the heat and dust on which our society stands. India is not about party politics. India is a country which, with a glorious past civilization history, went through terrible 300 years of colonialism. And in this 300 years of colonialism, the entire socio-economic fabric of India was distorted. A prosperous country in the world. When we came to independence in 1947, we were like a colony of beggars. In 1947, the life expectancy of an average Indian was not even 40 years. And we had very few hospitals. This medical college, SSK, MyPGM, Archikor, was not meant to be for the common people. They were only very VIPs of the world got into hospitals. And everybody else was left by the village side, by the roadside, where you had this jharmukh and this kind of medicine, and they were just left to die. So, in post-colonial India, when India became independent, we became an independent country. But because of financial constraints and also some problems with our social attitude, we were not spending as much on health and education that we should have. There has been a lot of demand for it from the common people, from the society, also from the political parties. And healthcare in India carried the curse of being, the reason a family almost got financially crippled was not because of loans, etc., for some other reason, but because some member of the family had actually become sick. So all this fantastic science you have heard about does not have any meaning unless it can be applied to our lives and times. So applying science to society is as much a duty of medicine as it is to learn operation and names of drugs and medicines and formulas. So in our world, if you look at the world today, the green parts are the parts where you have good healthcare. The red parts are the parts where the healthcare is very unsatisfactory. And the black parts are actually the worst. And look, India, the whole of Southeast Asia, is still at a kind of stage where our healthcare delivery to the people, all this fantastic knowledge is useless unless it reaches the people. We have a lot of work to do in this area. Some work is happening. Because you may have heard in the press, there is so much of argument and counter-argument between leaders and party A and party B and party C. We do not realize that even the government is thinking in terms of population healthcare programs, central level. We have Shastra Shati in the state level. And many of these things are being planned in the model of the national health system in the United Kingdom, and sooner it happens, the better. So all of you who are aspiring to come into medicine, to be doctors, you will read a lot of books, you will practice a lot of specialty, but please do remember that our work and our specialty is useless unless it finds its true application. But we doctors, we in medicine, we have achieved something. And what have we achieved? We have not won elections, we have not won seats, but look at the life expectancy of the world. From 1850s, from the median life expectancy of 40 years, today worldwide, human life expectancy is almost in 80 years plus. I told you about the beginning of life, the animal kingdom. Think, the tiger, the lion, the dog, the rat, the cat, the mouse. No other animal lives longer today than it did 5,000 years before. But human beings, we, through our thinking, our thought process, we have been able to almost double the life expectancy of the human race. This is a product of thinking, of science and its application. India is following a similar curve. From our pre-independence life expectancy of 40 years, today the average Indian is living for 60, 65 years, which is a huge achievement in our terms. So it is not all negative, it is not all gloom and doom. Forget about what the political banter is about. Your generation, the future is in your hands. You have to hold it. You know, we go to many hospitals. We go to many places to do clinics, see patients. And I will end by showing you the clinic, the hospital, which has made a lasting impression in my mind. I once did a clinic in Andaman Nicobar Islands. And the hospital in Andaman Nicobar Islands is a part of this building which is called the cellular jail. So it's a part of the cellular jail where 589 Indians in the freedom struggle were kept imprisoned and tortured. And in the same building, a wing of the cellular jail today functions as a hospital. So as I had finished my clinic, seeing patients, just next door to my clinic, I saw an exhibition. And this was the exhibition. So friends, young men, young women, boys and girls, when we think of our future, these are the people who remind us what the future of India is about. So when you and I do medicine the next time, we will look at science and we will look at society. And we will have to remind ourselves of the duty and the pledge that we owe to our nation. And not just for the sake of telling you of the story of his diabetes. We end with the words of this great man who said that there is no room for any kind of negativity. If there is a problem, the solution lies within. And that is what medicine has taught us for the last 3,000 years. Thank you. If you have any questions, you're welcome.
Any questions? Please raise your hand, those who have any questions.
You're welcome to ask any questions. Don't feel afraid.
Dr. Sarkar is here. If you go to a hospital, you will not get a date before 6 months.
That's not a good thing.
So please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. It's a lifetime opportunity. Yeah.
Yes, yes, please.
What's the concept of bloodless surgery?
Bloodless surgery, you see, the question is, people said we are divided into different blood groups. A lot of surgery, a lot of medicine evolved during the war. There are 3 wars which are very important in history of medicine. One is the First World War, secondly is the Korean War, and the third is obviously the Second World War. Now, in the wars, what people were doing is, say, when you had Napoleonic Wars and Crimean War, like Florence Nightingale. Florence Nightingale came into prominence during the Crimean War. So, what used to happen is, you imagine somebody in a war, a wound or something who has lost a lot of blood. So what we were doing for many, many years, surgeons were doing it, they were getting another fellow, they said, look, putting a drip in him, his blood would come out, go into the other person. But it was well noted that this would only succeed about 20-25% of the time. Rest of the time, a lot of them were getting reactions and dying. Because we did not have this concept that even the same red-looking liquid blood could be different. So a gentleman called Lance Steiner did a lot of path-breaking work, and he identified the antigens A and B, which are on the red blood cells. And it happens in various combinations, either A, B, AB or O, and that gives 4 principal blood groups. In pathology, there is a concept called antigen-antibody reaction. It's like, just for a joke, if you have a Trinamool person and a BJP sitting side by side, that's an antigen-antibody reaction. They will fight, call one another's names, hate, whatever. At the end of the day, they may both be dead. Whatever. But in this antigen-antibody reaction was the one. So Lance Steiner gave us the idea that, look, blood looks same, but it is not same. There are differences. But some of these blood groups, so you have people who have A, B, O, AB, there are also many cryptic, uncommon substances. What happens in surgery is, like supposing suddenly tomorrow morning, I have a very emergency case to do. Supposing there is a blood group which is called B negative or AB negative, very rare blood group. Blood problem is that blood still cannot be manufactured artificially. The only way to get blood is an organ. Like you have heart transplants, lung transplants, liver transplants, blood donation is also like a transplant. Blood is an organ, but it is only liquid, not a solid. So you cannot donate blood for me automatically, and if I am a patient who has a very rare blood group, needs life-saving operation, what will we do? So there are ways and means behind it. There are certain machines which enables us, like the blood that will be, why do I need blood? Because in the operation you will be losing some blood. So you can recycle that same blood and give it back to the patient. That is one method. And sometimes when you do it with some notice in hand, we can actually, supposing my starting hemoglobin was 11, people can give me some medicines whereby my starting hemoglobin will be elevated to 15. So if I have a hemoglobin of 15, they will actually take some of my blood before the operation and store it. And if it is required, that blood will be used for me. We don't have it so much in India. When we were in England for a good part of 12 years, there used to be a subsect of very orthodox Christians called Jehovah's Witnesses. There are many of them. And when you operate on Jehovah's Witnesses, I've only operated on one in India, a strange combination, a Japanese Jehovah's Witness who came in with an unstable angina. I was in a different hospital. And there we did what was the first kind of bloodless surgery. We took his own blood, recirculated it. And he's a young chap. He was actually in the merchant navy. He came off his ship. He said, you can kill me, but you cannot. They're very orthodox. He said, look, you cannot give me any unit of blood. So he underwent an entire heart operation without any extra blood being used. And thereafter, we've done it many times. Like today, if you have 100-hour operations, we only will have requirement for blood in 50% of them. Half the heart surgeries do not consume any blood at all. And because blood is a very valuable resource, it only comes through people donating. Still, nobody is clever enough to manufacture blood. There are some compounds called fluorocarbons. Fluorocarbons in crystalloid solution can give you the oxygen carrying capacity, but still it is not a good substitute for blood. So blood is a very valuable resource and it must never be wasted. That's it. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you see swelling in leg, whenever you look at any issues, you think of it in two ways. One is it can be due to any problem in the leg itself. Like there are people who may have hurt their legs, you may have injury, arthritis, etc. But if you do not have any problem in the leg itself, it can be due to, because why in the leg? Because supposing a person is 5.5 feet tall, what is this? The gravitational pressure at your head and foot are entirely different. Now in this blood circulation I showed you, what happens? In the veins, when they take blood back to the heart, there is no pump to take the blood back to the heart. Heart only pumps blood to the rest of the body. The drainage back to the heart in terms of physics, fluid dynamics, is entirely passive by reverse gravity. Because when blood goes from your tip of your toes to the heart, that is not how the gravity works. It's anti-gravity. So why does blood at all go from your legs to the heart? How does it happen? Because the muscles contract. The muscles, the veins are in the muscles contract, and thereby help the blood to go to the heart. So if for any reason the pumping system is weak, the heart is not working efficiently, then you can get, there are more complicating factors. The pressures in the right heart, when we have oversimplified the heart. I have shown you the heart as one organ that pumps. Heart is not one organ. Heart is two organs. When God designed heart, God was out of space because the human body actually needs two hearts. One for the right side, the venous side, one for the left side, the arterial side. There was no space in the chest. So what did God or nature do? There are many, an octopus has 8 hearts. There are a lot of fishes who have 4 hearts. The evolution of the heart is still going on. Evolution, anthropology of the heart is a different subject. So for us, for the time being, the two pumping chambers, right and left, were fused across the partition that we call the septum. So if the right side weakens, the drainage back of the blood to the heart will not be very good, and then you can notice a swelling of the legs. So if somebody was quite well, head and hearty, no leg problem, suddenly you are noticing a swelling of the leg, you must report to your doctor. And the doctor will have a look, do a few tests and tell you what's wrong. But yes, it can be due to the heart.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sir, we always go for, whenever we are talking about blood transfusion, we go for the ABO blood group and the rhesus blood groups, B positive or something like that.
Doesn't hold anymore.
Okay.
The concept of the universal donor and the universal recipient does not hold anymore apart from wartime situations. Only in war. Otherwise it doesn't hold. So if you went for medically validated proper transfusion, it has to be, supposing I am B positive, you are B positive. Fine, on paper you can give your blood to me. But beyond the A and B antigens, there are a lot of minor focuses. Like when we do transplants. In transplants, transplantation is like getting married. So one of these young girls were getting married, their parents will choose, select, filter people for last 2 years. Height, work, color, shape, income, work, etc. So similarly, there are a lot of criteria on on which the matching takes place. So blood has to be actually cross-matched in the lab. A drop of your blood, a drop of my blood, somebody will see it is not reacting, only then. So universal donor and universal recipient, which is ABO negative is like the universal donor, O negative is like the recipient. In examinations fine, but not used.
Yeah, so the MN group does not come up at all in this case?
Not really. But as I told you, even I don't know enough about it. The blood grouping is again in detail. You've got the Bombay blood group, which is very troublesome. Then, when we do heart surgery, we have to test. Nowadays we do a lot of children's surgery. There are something called antigens which are very clever. They only react when the temperature is cold. And during open heart surgery, always cool the body. So there are a lot of cryptic factors. So matching has to be very proper.
Actually, we are running late. We are short of time. So actually, we are running late. So we thank you, sir, for sharing our knowledge and valuable thoughts to us. And now I would like to request Professor Poddar to give some small gift to Dr. Sarkar on behalf of Professor Ghosh Foundation.
Lights.
Now I would like to request Mr. Gautam Singh to say a few words.
Hello. I have nothing to say after this introductory lecture. Wonderful having Dr. Sarkar here. I mean, there are many lectures I have seen throughout my career. He is one of the best. And a round of applause for Dr. Sarkar again. I'd like to make an announcement that those who have registered for the sit and draw competition, please you are requested to go downstairs, and in the physics gallery our staff members are there to accommodate you in the sit and draw competition. So please listen carefully. Those who have registered for sit and draw competition, please you are requested to go downstairs. Others have to stay back. Others have to stay back for rest of our program.